It's July 19th, 2007. We're at the Air Zoo with Stephen Loveland. Stephen is with the 8th Air Force Reunion Group, and Stephen is going to tell us his background before, during, and after World War II. Stephen, welcome to the Air Zoo, and give us your background. Where were you born, when, what did you do before the military, so on?
Yeah, I was born in the bend of a river of the Monongahela in western Pennsylvania. It was a steel-making town. The plant was started by Andrew Carnegie, and they had their first big strike in 1891, right after the Franco-Prussian War.
What was the name of the town?
Homestead.
Homestead. Homestead, Pennsylvania.
Homestead, Pennsylvania.
When were you born?
September 6, 1918.
Okay.
And this was a small village in the bend of the river, and it was densely populated by cheap labor that had come over into the massive migrations of the early 1900s and continue right on through with the refugees at the end of World War II. But these were ethnic groups, the Irish, the English, the Welsh, those from Czechoslovakia and those from Bulgaria, Romania, the Russians, the Ukraine.
You went to school there?
Yes, several miles away, actually across the river, is the city of Pittsburgh, and they have the cathedral learning at the University of Pittsburgh. You have Carnegie Institute of Technology. You also have Duquesne University. They're on the prehistoric bluff that we find out in the early history of the United States, along with terms like Detroit and Marquette. And
okay.
So forth.
You graduated from high school. Did you go to college? Go to university?
I graduated in 1936. Then I had a scholarship at Duquesne. Went there for several years and dropped out. Joined the National Guard. And then in they started drafting in 38 and 39, 42. But I was in the National Guard, and then at Duquesne I joined the artillery, field artillery, ROTC. And I graduated that school in May of 1942, right after Pearl Harbor. And from there I went as an artillery officer to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and where I underwent basic training. And from then, in 1943, I transferred into the Air Corps, did my primary training at Maxwell Field in Montgomery, Alabama. Then I did my primary flight training at Arcadia, Florida, and I wasn't successful in passing my primary flying training because I excelled in every one of the other subjects except in one phase of aerobatic training, and that was accomplishing a smooth Immelman maneuver, which is doing a backward loop, and when you get to the top of the loop, you go ahead and right the plane parallel to the ground. I could not overcome the pull of gravity on my legs. No way could I. I did special strengthening exercise, but it didn't work. So then they weren't going to turn a good man down, so so they went ahead and transferred me for navigational training, and I wound up at Ellington Field in Houston, Texas, and then from Houston, Texas, I went to the Hondo, Texas Navigation School, and then from getting my navigator's wings there, and then I was transferred to Bowling Field, Washington.
Okay, before we go into what you did at Bowling Field, tell me, why did you transfer from the Field Artillery to the Air Corps?
Because it was a fascination with the Air Corps, because where I lived, at the bottom of the river, it was strictly a climb up to a mountain to one of the airfields in the Allegheny Mountains known as Bettis Field, known as the graveyard of the aviators. Lost so many planes, and sometimes they'd fog over the river, and they'd be going back and forth across the river where I lived, trying to find Bettis Field, but that was in a mountain of cloud to the south. And so my friend and I, Carl Kelly, whenever this happened, day or night, we would run out into the paved streets with bed sheets, and we'd make a white arrow on the pavement bricks, pointing to pointing south. And all he had to do was just vector in on a straight line. I'll never forget, one of the planes that we saved was a Belanca Airbus, which was a specially designed hospital plane. And we both cheered when he went ahead and made a low turn and righted himself and started going up the mountain. So that's what it interested. And then the other diversion was, every time an airplane flew over, you would run out of the house to identify it. And it was usually might be a twin-engine Waco, or be a Curtiss Army Hawk, or it would be a Fokker trimotor.
Twin-engine Waco. What's a twin-engine Waco? You said twin-engine Waco.
No, I meant a single-engine Waco.
Yeah, biplane. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, take us to Bowling Field. When was this? In 43?
Oh, yeah. In 43, was sent to Bowling Field, and I didn't know that the situation in Europe, they were sending crews over there without any combat or field training. For instance, you would go to a place like Mountain Home, Idaho, to go ahead and learn tough navigation. Well, anyway, we had a choice there at Hondo to go become navigators on the Burma Hump, or go to Europe, and I was selected, and my job was to, the FBI came over and gave us training in submachine guns. And then we were given leave, a week's leave, and scuttlebutt was that we're going to Europe, which we did. So I was given a crew of about 15 navigators, and we went over to Europe on the Queen Mary. There was no destroyer escort on the Queen Mary because she was so fast, converted into a troop carrier. But her journey to Greenwich, Scotland, was by rocking the boat left and right, zigzagging, but still on a course. And the two fears that we were inculcated with by the ship's commander. And incidentally, the decks were loaded with GIs sleeping on the decks. Fire and being torpedoed at sea, and absolutely no smoking on board ship. And it was manned by an English crew. But I don't know how many were on the ship, 1,500 or 2,000 men. And we made it to Greenwich, Scotland. And from then we were sent to a gathering point for final distribution to the various squadrons. And that's how I wound up at the 92nd Bomb Group.
When was this?
This was in November and December of 43, and then I remember particularly doing 13 missions in the month of January, which included the fateful first B17 raid on Berlin. We had lost 69 bombers. And it was the greatest air loss up until time and after that. And so outside of those that blew up or because of fire or being hit by very deadly anti-aircraft fire. And we learned, of course, later that the Germans had recruited the best eyes and brains of the teenagers in Germany. And these were the crews this is an important point. The cloud cover over the North Sea, we would go ahead and gather the wings at various layers by flares over right around Lincoln, England, and then we would break up into separate wings in Scotland and squadrons, and then we would head in. And my plane was an all-silver plane, and I flew in the number 2 position, and it was all silver because it had just been flown in from the United States, but it had the special equipment on it, and this was the new equipment that the Germans knew about. And what happened, they had taken out the belly gunner's position and put in a massive tube, like a fluoroscope. And what it did, they had already mapped Germany using the metallic pattern of each city. There it was in black and white. And the PFF Navigator had to go ahead and memorize all those patterns, and sort of using a clear template of the cities, then they went ahead and put them over the fluoroscopic picture, and this way they were able to go right on to the initial point and then do the bombing runs. So
and you were a navigator, had been trained in this?
Yes, for the first time, but I didn't have any field training, so they had a PFF navigator that had never done it before. So there between the two, we were never used. We were doing this stuff and recording it, but ready to take over in case the front man was blown up. so we can finish the mission.
So you were kind of the #2 navigator.
Right. But I was the #2 man there. And when we crossed from Lincoln going eastward, it was a straight line right on into Berlin. And there was no navigation points for checking. There was no mountain sticking up from the clouds. There was no radio signal of any sort. You couldn't see the ground. And so consequently, we had been missing the target awfully. So there were 2 lakes going on into Berlin. One was Dimmer Lake, D-U-M-M-E-R, umlaut U, and the other one was Steinhuder See, which means lake, S-T-E-I-N-H-U-D-E-R. And because we would get very, very accurate climbing on course till we went up to 35,000 feet on into the target. And then, of course, losing all those planes over the raid of Berlin, and then those who were damaged were being picked off by German fighters on the way back.
Did you have any fighter escort into Berlin at this time?
Oh, no. That came much later, because the P-51s at that time, the P-47s, had to turn back. So it's much later that after my time. And my time, of course, was March 20th.
Okay.
That's when this infamous raid occurred. And we were hit over Berlin and struggled with that plane on a downward course. And of course, our old squadron was always calling to us, try to keep your nose up. We'll straggle a little back to go ahead and encourage you on, but please come back. And by that time, the hydraulic system was shot. We were on fire, 2 of the engines, and the drive shaft of the propeller shaft was white hot, generating a tremendous amount. It was just like being in a steel mill, looking at a heat of steel. And so we started descending, and then the pilot, and I was just sitting right behind him, lower at my desk, and I says, look, we're getting dangerously close. We're approaching 500 feet. So I heard him give the order to abandon ship. So I'm looking up through that trapdoor that you have there at the bottom of the nose. And I say, Hugh, don't be a hero. We're too damn far away from the Amsterdam for us to go ahead and make it into the North Sea, where we're going to go ahead and die in 3 minutes. So look, we're getting in an impossible height. Well, I can't wait anymore. Hugh, get the hell out of this plane. And I dropped out of that under 500 feet. Chute didn't want to open. My velocity was tremendous, but instantaneous, because there were 2 factors. You had the forward downward speed of the bomber, which is one set of figures, but the same gravitational same gravitational field, and then plus the fall. And I must have hit with a tremendous impact, but I did it with a well-trained forward roll in the deep snow.
Did the chute open at all? Was it partially
Popped
opening?
right on impact.
Okay.
When I had hit
and rolled.
And of course I heard the snapping in the legs and the tissues going. You heard the pop. This reminds me of a quarterback of the Mets getting a getting a muscle pull down in that area. So anyway, I'm lying there, stunned.
Earlier you talked about the teenagers in Germany.
Oh yes, oh yes. This is very interesting about the teenagers because they sent out a call to those who were brightest and also with good vision. Now, this thing was a good vision. Now, they were in cahoots with Japan. Now, to become a fighter pilot in the Japanese Air Force, they tested your eyes during the day, and you looked up into the sky to try to pick out the stars. That's how they went ahead and located them. So these were the deadly boys. If they went ahead and bracketed you, we were at 35,000 always exactly. And the other thing that we had to be very, very careful about, as a navigation aid, our weather map showed what are known as isobars, which are pressure layers as we go from the ground up. So the only way that you can do is estimate your ground speed by borrowing increments of 10,000 feet from the isobars. And you also had always a tremendous wind, the higher you went, coming in from the Norwegian Sea. And that was always a high pressure area and would be drawing against our stream of planes and would be pushing them southward, southeastward. So we had to crab the planes. And on one particular episode, the push of that southeast wind was so great that, and we have the analogy here, that you're on a river and you want to get to the other side, but the current, the opposing current, is so heavy that you've got to crab your rowboat. So here, the wing after wing had to go ahead and go into a massive crab to go ahead and get to Berlin. And what happened is that this was there, but with a boat, the whole river was moving. In the air, the whole air mass was moving, so all of those wings were blown southeastward across Germany, and we wound up over Stuttgart. And the custom then was the Air Force staff would always want to go ahead and get a combat decoration, maybe the DOC, and that he went over into combat. Well, on this particular time when we were blown to Stuttgart, he takes over command of the thing and turns the wings in the wrong direction, and we were picked off by the German fighters. And you can go ahead, and Stuttgart is just north of the Swiss border, and you could see each one of the planes blowing up and crashing on the Swiss mountains. And so those planes that tried to sneak in, while the others were on course towards England, France and England. And we found out that the Swiss were attacking our bombers, and they were using Me-109s. So that was a very, very disturbing thing.
Yeah, on that mission you survived. You got back to England, huh?
Yeah, I survived that one.
So let's go back to Germany now. You've
okay, well this was south of Bremen, about 30 miles. And I don't know what happened to the plane, but the story we got was on Burnett was found at or near the bomber. It must have been burning. And not enough, I don't know, well, the fluorescent tubes must have gone the way of all tubes,
yep,
burning up. So that lies in another story of how Burnett's body disappeared. Would you be interested in hearing? That is another episode.
Who was Burnett again, the pilot?
Yeah, Hugh Burnett. The grave details. We're trying to find out what happened to his body. So they sent over teams over in that section of this is the area where they spoke what they call Plattdeutsch, but it is the flatland that goes Schleswig-Holstein right in there. So they found they went through all the cemeteries and interviewed the sextons, and where the sextons had died, they interviewed members of their family, because they would be always there, probably helping with the horses or feeding them or riding on the trundle wagons. But they couldn't find Burnett's body. American grave details would be digging up the ground at the cemeteries looking for his body and checking over the town records and so forth to find out where or nearby he could have been buried. He could never have found it. So after pressure from somebody anyway, they started digging again, because they said he's buried in this corner of a cemetery. And so finally they got a crew together and they started digging up that corner. And they went through 3 layers of bodies. So he is buried along with his kid brother at the American Cemetery at St. Evolde, E-V-O-L-D-E, Belgium. Twin graves, 2 brothers, both shot down over Germany.
Okay, let's get back to your mission of March 20th. You
went all through these things.
So what happened next?
When I hit, well, something very strange happened. When I was growing up, it was right around 25, 26, or 1927. The premier world writer was the famous Thomas Mann of Germany. And this was the bestseller because everybody bought a bestseller. And the title was The Case of Sergeant Grisha, G-R-I-S-C-H-A. And Sergeant Grisha was a deserter. And by this time, the German army was attacking the Russians. And so being he was a deserter, he found a German soldier dead. And he went ahead and took his ID and became that German soldier. And then it happened. It turned out that that dead soldier was a deserter also. So here he was arrested and put in manual labor. And somehow or other up in Berlin, the German general and his girlfriend started reviewing the files, and this one was great interest. So they held up his court-martial proceedings while they went ahead and took their time reviewing the case of Sergeant Grisha, cause célèbre. And it tells the story of he meets up with a refugee woman.
This was 1927 that the book was written?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but one of those quirks that happened to me...
Were the Germans fighting the Russians in...
That's right, that's right. But that particular... Now, the scene is Sergeant Grisha, 1927, in the book. And he is in the snow. And he starts swatting the flies. Now, what kind of flies do you have in zero weather in Russia? You have the Russian winter flies. They have flies, big ones, in winter because the food supply is there right in the animal droppings. So he's swatting at those flies, and I start swatting at the flies. And then I realized these weren't flies, these were bullets. And I was being pinned down by the fire, rifle fire, from the old geezers that were the Landsturm protecting the land. Old men. So finally one came up to me and shoved his rifle right into my throat. And so I said to him in German, "Brauchen Sie nicht eine Zigaretten?" And he pulled back his rifle. And I'm lying there, and I'm in, the pain is now starting in. So after a while, a German staff car with officers came nearby, and so they went ahead and caught me by both shoulders, and I was dragged into the staff car.
How did you know German?
Oh, well, I was at college. The premier instructor there in German was a former German artillery officer. And he had come over here after World War I, and he had some, I think, probably German relatives there in Wisconsin. He attended the University of Wisconsin, got his PhD in some sort of studies, I don't know. But he was also teaching German, and he taught me German, in addition to the, which I had learned at my grandmother's knee. So anyway, I should have kept my mouth shut and not spoken German, but anyway, I had to get the bullet, rather the rifle out of my throat.
Okay.
So, now,
so they've taken you to the staff car.
All right, then the staff car came to a tremendous row of bombed out hangars. And there they went ahead, and by that time my air crew had already been gotten together, but no Burnett. Mm-hmm. And my air crew, you know, they would carry me, lock hands, and they would carry me, and I'd put my arms around their necks. So they lined us up, and typically whenever there were prisoners and on a fighter base and somebody was shot down, one of the pilots, the German pilots, would always come out to get his souvenir pictures. So here we had this motley crew, and we had the blue heater suits, the monkey suits, out of a bright blue color, and it must have been a some show of any. And always with these Germans, they have the long blonde hair and the damn thing just like Barbara Hutton coming across her right eye, always doing that with his hand, pushing the hair aside, and then crouching on his knees to go ahead and get the ideal pictures of us prisoner of war. And then they threw us in a train, and now it's getting nightfall, and we're taking to the city of Oldenburg. To me, the city of Oldenburg was, I knew from my German, a tremendous amount of tradition. That whole area, Schleswig-Holstein, for instance, at the sea we had the Frisian Islands. Now what were the Frisian Islands famous for in world literature? This is where the Brothers Grimm were from when they wrote the fairy tales. And then the writers' colony in Hamburg and Oldenburg and so forth. And Oldenburg, oh, we were slapped into a prison there. And the first thing I noticed, scratched on the wall, was two words, zu Hause. In German, that means at home. So anyway, Hans Storm wrote Das Vaterlandslied, which was became the national anthem of Germany, as opposed to Deutschland über alles. And it was set to music. And very famous, of course, it was part of the German psyche now. So anyway, from there, they decided to put us on the train. Oh, in the meantime, I'm begging my crew to jump out of the train, and they were just too beaten. Nah. Because the crapper on those trains, you don't say restroom, a Ruheplatz, a place for rest. They would say abort, the word abortion, from the word abortion. There was the word abort, where you went ahead and aborted. So they.
Had you received any medical attention for your broken legs?
No. By that time, edema had set in. No medical. So anyway, we were put on a train to Stalag Luft. We didn't know we were going to Stalag, but what we were doing, because of air raid scares all the time, we would go ahead and be stopping. It wasn't too much of a distance. I probably would figure maybe about 150 miles or 250 miles. They would go ahead and stop at every railroad station. And for propaganda purposes, they would go ahead and take us out on the platform till the people went ahead and started getting clubs and stones and cans and bottles and started pelting us with it and beginning screaming and getting up on the platform and coming right up close to us. They wanted to hit us. And they threw beer bottles at us, and my only regret about that, they didn't have any beer. So what a disappointment. So this went on from station to station, and my poor crew carrying me by this time. So we got to, I found out later it was known as Stalag Luft. I'm still in rough shape. So they went ahead and gave me the hot and cold treatment. They went ahead and put me into a room that was just an empty room with no furniture in it, nothing. And they went ahead and put me in that room and turned on the cold. Open up the windows, turn on the cold. And boy, it was freezing. And the trap door, the dog door, and the main door was open, and somebody shoved in a decanter, something like our modern coffee things. And it was filled with some fluid, and I heard the word tea, which is T-E. And it came in, and I tasted this stuff, and of course it was foul tasting, but that's the way they drank their tea. Maybe they had been soaked in wood and then poured into the glasses. But anyway, I gulped it down. But by this time now, after all this time, I had to urinate. And I was ready to explode. But I wasn't about to urinate on that floor because it would spread. I'd be saturated. And so I pissed into the tea thing. And when I saw his hand come in through the door, I handed it to him. I said, Danke sehr, thank you very much. And I says, Jetzt gibt mehr Tee. I says, here's more tea. Just my, well, anyway, then they went ahead and turned on the heat. I mean, they turned on the heat. Luckily, they never took my flight jacket from me, my leather flight jacket. But they turned on that heat, and I think I was in delirium that. But anyway, the following morning, I'm dragged in by two orderlies, slumped into a chair. It was a room about this size. And in comes in a dapper German soldier. I forget what his rank was. But if you have any retention of how Dr. Goebbels, the propaganda minister of Germany, looked, he was short, narrow-shouldered, and he had a dark countenance with a dark beard, and of course, and this is what the man looked like. So he says in beautiful English, he says, I have here a sheet that I've got to check off some questions I've got to ask you. And he says, he repeats my name, nicht wahr? I said, 0439135. And this went on and on. And he says, this is just a simple routine thing I'm asking you. And he says, for instance, we know all about you. If I'm going to ask questions about your background, I just check it against this list. So he gives me where I'm born, when I'm born, where I went to grade school, where I went to high school, where I went to college. I can't remember whether he asked Dr. Dirks, D-I-R-K-S, my instructor's name, but he was bound to have it. He was bound to have it because Dirks was a character. While he'd take time off during his lecture, and he'd go through the marching manual. Vorwärts, I'll go links, I'll go rechts, and some other commands, and he'd actually do the command there at his lectern during the lecture. What a man! He wasn't 6 feet tall. He was 6 feet 6 high. He gave the impression of tremendous height. And anyway, so he's asking me these questions, and he says, oh, incidentally, Lieutenant, he says, you know, your associate navigator has already given us the information that we need to have. And I said, oh? I said, that's very interesting. What kind of information, you're asking me, what kind of information did he give you? I said, come on, come on. He said, why are you making friends with me? I said, listen, I feel sorry for you. Boy, do I feel sorry for you. Let me tell you a little story, and it's going to get you right in your belly. I says, I was taught by a prominent German by the name of Dirks. He said, oh yes, we have this on our list about you. And I says, we knew what the hell was going on in Germany, but I didn't know just how they could have been like this, because Dirks was instrumental in getting me 2 scholarships in Germany. And I said I already had my passports to go in Germany, and I think the ship was the passenger ship called the Main, M-A-I-N, after a city in Germany. And I said, while I was in Brooklyn, ready to go over, I was going to go to University of Marburg, and I think the other one was the famous medieval one, Jena. And so anyway, I had my tickets and so forth and passport. And I says, in the middle of the night, there was a knock on my door in Brooklyn. And the man there gave me his ID. And he was from the State Department. And he says, we run a card check on you. And he says, you know what is going to happen to you when you go into Germany? I said, what? He said, in middle of September 1938, Hitler promulgated several laws. Among them was the law outlawing all German political parties in Germany outside the Nazi Party. And the other law was this one, that anybody on German soil after the day of the decree whose parentage could be traced to Germany through the mother and the father or the grandfather or the grandmother, you automatically lost your foreign citizenship. And I says, that is exactly what has happened to you, isn't it? You came over here and in your uniform, and I says, incidentally, I can even tell you where you're from in the United States. You're from Fort Riley, Kansas, from the cavalry school. He says, how do you know this? I says, telltale. Look at your boots. You've got McDowell boots. And I said, if the name strikes me correctly, it's the only place outside of Texas that you can get a McDowell boots. And you have taken the original saddle color and have darkened it with some sort of crap that you Germans have in your boots. And I said, you are trapped. You are an American soldier interrogating an Americans. And American on American. And boy, tears just came down his eyes. And watching body language, the muscles stood out there on his cheekbones and in his jaw. And he became shaking, and he ran out of the room. I never saw him after that. So the next day, I was thrown into a 40 and 8 boxcar. You know what those are. Yeah. With just some traces of flour, rather straw on it. And there were 10 other bodies there in the boxcar with me. And as we were pulling out, you know, the stop and go things, taking out of the marshalling laws, the stench started coming in. The fellow next to me had been trapped in the heavy snows there in Germany, and gangrene had set in. It was awful. Well, somehow or other, it took a week. And here I thought I would needed a bowel movement, but somebody carried me out there in the field. I couldn't do anything. But civilians were walking back and forth. And the characteristic of a civilian, that he has been out scrounging something, every one of them had a formal type of briefcase in which they probably put their bread slices. So here, they just looked and kept on going. So anyway, I was carried back by some soldiers and laid down, and I was going in and out of it. And what I hadn't realized, that hypothermia had set in on me. And so I was actually there, sort of like a half-frozen corpse. And finally, they got me where I was and so forth, I don't know. But I found myself in what they call a lazaret, a small hospital. It was between, I assume, between our prison camp, Stalag III, and the town of Zagan. Now, Zagan was a staging area for the Russian front, and particularly for the Hitler Youth. You could hear their songs, marching songs of the middle of the night, while they're being herded into boxcars going to the Russian front. Anyway, I found myself there, and luck was with me. They had as a prisoner there a top military surgeon, a colonel. And he was mystified by what was happening to my legs, because he had no way of no diagnostic, and must have been awful, because I couldn't bend over. I was lying down. So they must have had, I surmised, they must have had tremendous respect for him, because in the middle of the night I was taken by a cart to a hospital there in Zagan, and they smuggled me in, and they took an x-ray of my leg. And then he knew how to treat me with the limited means that he had. But I had a vertical compression fracture very badly, and you can see the jagged part like that. Mm-hmm. And that was where the trouble was. And plus over here, the points of insertion of the muscles were torn loose and all that sort of thing. So he of course insisted that I stay there, because at least I was going to get some good food, such as it was. And he was taking care of some very, very bad case. And so when I was able to move around vertically a little bit, I was assisting at some of the operations.
Did he put a cast on your legs then?
No, not. At some point it was put on by a German doctor, but I don't know at what point it was. But by that time I was able to at least stand on it, but with pain. So he had a case there, was a serious case, where he had a British Tommy who had been with General Cook's army in North Africa after we had, after the Brits had reconquered all of North Africa, from Tunis, the Mediterranean Sea, all the way down to Alexandria and the ports of in Algeria, and then Tobruk and Benghazi, all the way down. He had captured this, and what had happened is Churchill, in his continuing blunder of thinking he was a field marshal, was talking about starting a new front and going into the soft underbelly of Europe, going through Crete and Greece, Bulgaria, Albania, Hungary, and Austria.
Okay, we're back in the hospital there.
Hospital.
You said that you were helping the doctor treat a Tommy.
Yeah, a Tommy who was hemorrhaging from piles. And so the only thing is that they had to operate, and there was no anesthesia. So my job was, well, he was on all fours, and my job was to go ahead and hold his front two elbows, and then with my left arm wrap around his neck and hold him down, while another orderly went ahead and held down his knees, and then another orderly parted the cheeks, and the operation was made. And I don't recall whether he blacked out or what, but it was a horrible, horrible experience. But anyway, he saved the man's life with that stitching. And I'll always remember the big pan of water, a big dish pan of water, and it was a deep mocha color. And this was the antiseptic solution. He was just digging his hands right into the thing.
Okay.
Well, anyway, I was.
Where was this at? Was this at Stalag 3?
This was at Stalag 3, but I don't know just what the configuration of the buildings were. Then I was taken into I was kept there in the hospital, and I went into a coma. Then I lost my vision, and there was a captured American artillery officer there, a medic, who was probably trapped on one of the patrols, and he sat next to me day and night because I was dying. And unbeknownst to me, they had given me a plate, they were giving me a plate of a German blood sausage, even with a hog's hair into the thing. And I was almost feral. I just a mess of that stuff and put it right into my face and just ate it like a dog.
This was after your legs had healed, after you were...
No. I'm still being in that lazarette, but they put me in a bunk.
Okay.
I put me in a bunk, and they had other flyers there in the particular group because they was telling me what was. Otherwise, I would never known about the captain or about the food and so forth. And then also the problem of impacted bowels. Well, anyway, I was ultimately released into the camp and given me some old clothes and shoes.
Now, how did your legs heal? How did your legs heal? You know,
very, very, very well. Very well, but I was on a regimen of walking the perimeter path.
Okay.
Slowly till I got there. And of course...
Now this was, the one doctor had got x-rays taken of your legs.
Yeah.
Could he do anything about it then, or?
I don't know what he did,
Okay.
but I don't know.
Okay, so your legs recovered, and you said you were dying and you ate this food.
Well, yes, this was while I was in sort of recovery room there.
Okay.
And so I know that if he was a surgeon, he was probably assisting the French colonel.
Okay. So you're now out of the hospital. And
I'm in the camp.
Part of the general camp.
And of course, there was no problem of identification because my air crew, well, let's see, two officers, the bombardier and the co-pilot were there.
Okay.
For identification. And then came the evacuation, the death march. On the death march there. That was rather horrible. We had pilots, aircrew, that didn't want to go on, and they just lay down on the road.
When was this?
On the road from Zagan into Halbau, Halbau,
Yeah.
and Springburg.
When?
This was, I forget the dates, but this was with a Russian advance.
Okay.
into Germany.
They decided to move all the prisoners out of Stalag III?
Oh yes, because the Germans would, or rather the Russians would impress us into the army, or else send us to the labor camps, which they did with Britishers and Americans. That's a rather sordid story. We never saw them again. So one interesting thing is that we all prepared for some evacuation, so we had saved on food, canned stuff, pieces of cheese and some powdered milk. So we looked like hobos coming out of that camp in the middle of the night when the evacuation came out. Some of them went ahead and made makeshift sleds out of wood, but usually by loading up your pockets or having the hobo sack on your shoulders. And the prisoner in the camp was the famous Murdo MacDonald from Scotland. Has his name appeared in any of your stuff? If you want a minute later on, I'll give it to you. It's very important. Anyway, we're getting up in the dark, and the cigarettes, the rain barrels for fire prevention and so forth, we went ahead and dumped all the cigarettes, the rain barrels that destroy the tobacco.
Why?
So the Germans wouldn't retrieve them, because the biggest piece of money in America and then was a pack of cigarettes. This was a lifesaver. But when you're speaking of all of those American camps around there, and every one of them was saving cigarettes to go ahead and make an exchange for food, because we didn't know where the hell we were going, or whether there were 3 Russian armies, Konev, Timoshenko, and I forget the third one. Hitler had given the order to smash right through. The southern part of the Baltic Sea was a lowland, and what call it like.
You said Hitler had given the order. You mean Stalin?
No. Stalin gave the order. A 3-pronged attack along the Baltic Sea, and then through the center of Berlin, and then through the southern sector. And every man, German man, woman, and child shall be killed. And so these were all the people that had gone ahead and displaced the Polish farm folk, and they were leaving all of Poland in panic because they had gotten choice property, and the Ruskies got that western third of Poland. So that it was panic. The women were carrying frozen infants at their bosoms. And
did you see this on your?
I saw this. I was walking with him. There was a decrepit German guard. We were carrying his rifle until word came down to give the rifles back. We just felt sorry for the old guy. There's always saying, "The Krieg ist kaputt. The Krieg ist kaputt." It wasn't the old man. It was brutal. It was brutal. And then, coming nightfall, no place to stop. No place to stop. So finally, we reached Halbau, and there was an old German Lutheran church there that had been built in time of the Franco-Prussian War, dating about 1871. And how they went ahead and stacked all those Kriegies into that church, under the pews, on top of the pews, crosswise, etc. And here in this beautiful church, the altar up there, altar up there, cursing, bitching, everything. It was just a and finally
this was all the prisoners of war.
Huh?
This was all the POWs that were...
Oh, yes, 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 but you're talking about, we're talking about a movement of about 5,000 prisoners, because this was a tremendous, like lemmings going across the land, crowding the roads and so forth. And at the forefront, 3 German colonels and a brigadier general. Are you familiar with his name?
No.
His name was Vanneman. Before the war, he happens to be an aide at the American embassy in Berlin, so he's well known.
Okay.
And this is very, very important, that after he, probably with a phone call to his cronies in Berlin, was able to go ahead and get safe package directly north to go to Berlin to see if he could get some alleviation of this massive prisoners of war trudging. So whether we were also given a barn to crawl into, I don't know, must have been other barns all over there, that county, Kursprochau. And then on the next night, we were taken to a march to a brickmaking place, and it was warm and red brick dust everywhere. But anyway, we just, again, like sardines. And some couldn't lie down, they had to stand up. But anyway, it was warmth. And by that time, they were stealing each other's food. I know they raided my parcel. You go out of the room, take a leak, forget it. They already theft amongst our own troops. All right, and then finally we got to Spremberg, where we were fed a decent meal. And then from then by boxcar we were taken to Oflag 7A, which was a whole concentration of our troops. Now, have you heard of the redoubt?
I think so, go ahead.
You've heard, well, no, I won't touch a redoubt if you...
What's the redoubt?
The word got around that Hitler was going to take the cream of the POWs, probably 2,000, and take them to Berchtesgaden, Germany, and to hold as hostages, because his good friend, Francisco Franco, to whom he had lent planes, under the, lent planes, could then go ahead and get a submarine, a German submarine, and then go down to the Argentine. That was the schema. You never heard that one before?
No, I heard there's various proposals.
No, but this was the real thing, because it was terror. And you know, we were a stone's throw from Dachau. Let's see, where was I now?
Okay, you've just arrived at Stalag 7A.
Yeah, we arrived at Stalag 7A. The toilet facilities overran. Have you heard that story? All that filth was a yard high, not a yard high, but a 1.5 feet high. And I mean, it was solid filth. And can you imagine going out for the appel, the official? You're familiar with appel? Appel was a German word for the official count. Okay. And they went ahead and sidestepped the whole thing to go ahead and looking for prisoners. And I'm not looking for prisoners, but counting the prisoners. Yeah, that's right.
Looking for escapees.
Yes, and we got pieces of no, not looking for escapees, just counting everybody, and then you'd find out when somebody would be missing. When I escaped from there, that's what they found out about me. So anyway, the conditions were abominable. Plus, it was lice-ridden. Our arms were just all over your body, and just impossible to sleep. Humanity jam-packed. And plus, across the way, they had the enlisted troops, Russians and all the various ones. And the camp was put in charge of the SS, so we didn't know whether they turned their machine guns on us to just go ahead and wipe us out. But finally, we were liberated by Patton, General Patton.
Now, you said you escaped.
Oh yes, while I was there, I couldn't take it anymore because I knew something about medicine, and I was deathly afraid of typhus. You don't walk. You know, it's just like we had, what's this thing that we, you know, the protozoan that you get from unclean.
Okay, well, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So I would go ahead and get that, and also anthrax, and be wiped out, because you'd just be wiped out in a few hours.
So you were afraid of disease?
Yeah, so when I saw a chance, the movie The Guard and so forth, I went ahead and scaled the barbed wire and got in with a German war group. But you see, my time in prison camp was not wasted, because I was able to barter for a British uniform and British blue trousers. And some of those Brits were there for a long, long time, so I was able to cover up the brass buttons in case I got shot, in case I was captured and automatically shot, that I was not wearing a civilian uniform. So anyway, there was one particular.
Now, did you get out of camp, or did you go from one camp?
No, I got out of camp on the main road.
Okay.
And they had German enlisted men running the thing, and I was able to be picked up by him, and he put me down there in the Russian place, sleeping on the concrete. Anyway, I went out with a work detail that morning, and one of the Russian, German guards just kept watching me intently. Now, I was wearing a Belgian military coat, but in the inside pockets I had a German map. I had D-bar chocolate bars and various food stashed to make an exchange. So I just looked like a just a bedraggled
Belgian soldier.
Belgian soldier, but one who the operation was bombed out, and I was going back to Belgium to see my folks if I was caught on the highway and hide by the day. So anyway, he went ahead. I saw him. Well, we were on paraded, you know, doing the final count, and we were at a doing work at a coke works that was doing the supplying electricity for the city of Munich. So we were doing coke work there, and anyway, he pointed me out to the leader, and they went ahead and took me apart in front of the other prisoners of war and started ripping open my coat, and there was all this contraband stuff. They should have shot me right there. So they so he went ahead after a conference and so forth with the Feldwebels and the senior sergeant and so forth. They decided to shoot me. And there I'm standing, there with a coat behind me, and these other POWs looking at me, and I'm in the firing squad position. So then I says, well, you better make your move now. When he came over to, I don't know whether he was going to put something around my eyes, but I says, bitte, and I spoke in German, ich bin ein amerikanischer Fliegeroffizier, and that you can always shoot me. But I said, I would suggest to you, and I'm going like this, I would suggest to you, you can always kill me, I'm your prisoner, but whatever you do, don't do it foolishly, do it with written orders. Get some written orders, because you can take me to camp, do whatever you want to, but I suggest to you strongly, don't shoot me and get yourself in trouble, because if they find out, you're going to be shot. So he thinks, and he turns around. He says, Seitengewehr auf! That means, put your sidearms away. They were ready to, had their hands to go ahead and execute me. And me, who never smoked a cigarette in my life, walked over with that tattered German, and I says, can I have a cigarette, please? So they take me back to the camp. They don't take me into the camp, they take me into their quarters, and for the first time, I get a shower, get clean bed sheets, white, food, and they didn't take one thing out of the coat, including the escape maps, and one that I had also picked up from us, a silk one, a silk handkerchief that you went ahead and put on something white, and you saw a complete map of South Germany. Well, when I got back to our camp the next day, they decided to court-martial me, 3 colonels sitting there, and I said, look, I gave them that same talk about disease and so forth, and you know, and I looked at them, I don't think that you're aware how serious these disease, just one case, and this whole thing is going to be wiped out because there's no medicine. So they interrogated me. They said, weren't you aware that there was an order given by the chief command here of the Krieges that there weren't to be any escape or across routes, en route? I said, yeah, I was familiar with what was happening, and I says, I was wondering if you're the commander who issued this order was aware of what was happening, that his life was on the line. So they let me go. And then the next day, the presiding officer of the court-martial came over and wrapped in the German newspapers, there was a loaf of bread. The Krieges in the other compound threw it over the fence for Lieutenant Loveland. And then Patton came and rescued us. And of course, for the photo shoot, all the brass from the various compounds tried to get on, crawl up on the tank, including General Bub Clark, who was head of the South Corps. You heard of him? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, he was right up there in all his glory for the Patton man to go ahead and take his picture. End of story. All right, I'll just for your own edification, General Vanneman, military attaché in Berlin, goes up there. And you know, what was the German name of the German code? The famous one that they had, the machine.
Yeah. like Infinity or something like that, but I...
Somebody used something or other. Anyway, what would have happened if they went ahead and got from him the information that we had that code? Mm-hmm. He went ahead and jeopardized the whole war operation of the world mm-hmm. by disclosing this information to the Germans. And I can imagine the consternation that they had in Washington, that this man had the audacity to go ahead and pull off something like that. Well, they cashiered him, is what it was, because I know the reputation went around. Let me make this one other point. You've heard of the infamous bombing of Dresden, mm-hmm. how all the people were trapped down below the city? Yep. And you know, the one that was doing the most of the bombing was Air Marshal Harris. Mm-hmm. You've heard of him? Yep. He left England with his family into ignominy, and I think he went ahead and settled in South Africa. But it wasn't his fault. You know, insisted on the bombing of Dresden? Stalin told Churchill and the president, I want Dresden bombed, and he got it. He got it. Now, one other thing I'll tell you, and this, you can put it under your hat and so forth. They're not going to shoot me for it. But when we had gone ahead and made this sweep north to south on the ground across Germany, Eisenhower issued the order that all of our troops were to stop at the Oder River, which is the river runs north and south from Berlin south. And Patton blew his stack, losing all those lives, and then you're going to go ahead and stop it. And who's on the other side but the Russians? And now, and I defy you to find it anywhere, that a commander in the field can have correspondence with the head of a state, of a nation. Would he have had the effrontery to go ahead and do that with Churchill or anything? No way. It's just a no-no. But anyway, he pulled it off.
Who?
Eisenhower. Eisenhower. And he had some smart smart aides there, but I don't know what the hell happened that he went ahead and pulled off a stunt like that. And you know what? Now I'm going to ask you, you know what the result of that was?
No.
The Cold War.
The division of Germany, yeah. Yeah,
the Cold War. It happened. Then it starts suddenly, maybe you got one of the fighters here circling Berlin, going tip to tip, because the cargo planes were operating like clock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, after you were rescued, where did you go?
Oh, we went to Le Havre, and then we went to Le Havre. Then we were put on a Liberty ship and taken to New Jersey.
Okay.
Then from New Jersey, I was taken to on my way to North Carolina. But there's a final episode to this, very, very interesting. When I was shot down, Lord Haw, you heard of him, mm-hmm. announced my name on the broadcast that I was missing in action. And he gave my wife's address in Reidsville, North Carolina. You know, a ham radio operator in Newfoundland picked that up, and he sent a postcard to my wife in North Carolina. And who goes to the post office, or rather to the post box, and looks at this card, but her younger brother, I think he's about 16 or 17, looks at it, doesn't think any more about it, puts it in his hip pocket. And I don't know whether it was a day later or anything, he told his sister about it, and she screamed at him, "What? Give me that card," and then she slugged him. End of story.
Okay. You're back in the States. Did they do any medical?
Oh yes, oh yes. Then I was hospitalized at the Pratt General Hospital. They used to be the former Biltmore Hotel in Coral Gables, Florida.
Okay.
And I went through a long siege of care, I think a couple of years.
What did they have to fix? What were they curing? Why were you in the hospital?
The tremor. Tremor, couldn't control the tremor. I still can't. I was just like a zombie. Anyway, they were concerned about it. They, right at that time, in my area, were having a hell of a lot of soldier suicides. And the psychiatrist came right out and asked me, he says, "Are you going to be one of those like the one that happened yesterday? He drowned slit his wrists in a bathtub at the Patricia Hotel in downtown Miami?" I said, "No, I won't do it. I won't do it," but a whole mess of medical care.
Okay.
This doctor, that doctor. So anyway, one of them says, "Look, there's a university here. It's a young university, but they've got a school there. Look, why don't you just, and we're stone's throw, just use your wheelchair, and why don't you take several courses?" And that's what I did.
You were back in a wheelchair?
Oh yeah.
Even though you were able to escape from prison camp, your legs were good enough for that, but you were back in a wheelchair then.
Oh yeah, I don't know whether it was relapse or anything, but I was just a useless classic. It was a classic case.
Okay.
Of what happens to a soldier.
Combat fatigue.
Yeah. Boy, they had, and some of the techniques that they do now, they didn't even recognize what the condition was. But they were very, very concerned about me. That well, no two bodies are alike. Mm-hmm. And let's see, there's one thing else I want to...
Okay, so they told you to...
Oh, so anyway, so you want to transition anyway, what happened after college. So I enrolled in the law school there, and they promised me 2 years. And it turned out it ran around 3.5. So I tried went in a marine law, maritime law, which is the toughest field of law that there is, because you're dealing with special marine laws in each country. Mm-hmm. You're dealing with prize courts. The prize court has once it gets the jurisdiction over a ship, to sell it, and the title is good against the whole world, and you go all the way back to Greek and Roman law.
Okay.
So that's it, and then I gradually drifted off into getting away from the law entirely. I was in no shape.
Mm-hmm. So what did you do?
I became an aircraft designer. So
working for who?
Various outfits down there, because in South Florida, that was a place to go ahead and do aircraft design, because interiors and everything, because you didn't have to go into the downtime like on a ship. is what costs you money. So they wanted to go ahead and do the work and not worry about, or if you can find a warm hangar, because you know engine trouble or plane trouble happens no matter where you are, whether hot or whether it's cold. So they had facilities. They had Grumman in Jacksonville. They had 2 in Orlando. They had 2 in the greater Miami area. So it was all of that.
Okay.
But the names I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's it, and then I...
Retire from there?
Oh, yeah. Well, my wife has been dead now since 89.
Mm-hmm.
And then she, you know, there was a period of 2 years in her life that I knew nothing about, and she never volunteered. And when she died, I went through her papers. There was still the GI-issued pistol, and then the documents from the Signal Corps. She happened to be a code breaker, was an expert in Japanese and in mathematics. But she had to sign a document, like you had me sign a document, that any breach of any information in times of emergency, you're subject to summary court-martial with a death penalty.
Okay.
And also during the Show of Brilliance, when we had the missile scare, Castro, when the missiles were zeroed in on Miami, Jacksonville, Mobile, Atlanta, New Orleans, Charleston, zeroed in on them. She was appointed Deputy Chief of Defense, and our orders gave her absolute power to commandeer at gunpoint foodstuffs, fuel, transportation, anything. Summary power.
You were still married at the... You were still married?
Of course, of course.
And she was working then for the government, and you were working...
Oh, well, yes.
Lawyer.
But that... No. This all happened during the... After I got back from overseas, she had already left because they asked her to leave. She had a husband who was a prisoner of war, and she was a security risk in Washington. And no, she had to get out of it. And then...
we're talking about the Cuban Missile Crisis.
That was, let's see, 1960.
Yeah, you said that she had the ability to...
Oh, yes, and yes. But, you know, it was... JFK went ahead and got a hold of Khrushchev, and it was...
Okay, but how was your wife involved in it? If she was...
Oh, the orders came from Washington.
She was still working for the government then.
Well, oh, yes, and whatever character... Yes, they knew about her. Okay. So, of course, they had to find reliable people with a high intellect and so forth. And these 2 kids, you see, they're products of it. The daughter, did I tell you about her?
No.
Nationally prominent. She, prior to her accident, she is a nationally known expert on pacemakers. She would hold seminars twice a month in the United States, Canada, and Europe, teaching medical personnel how to install them, the wiring, the one-way wiring in the human chest, and how to take them out, how to handle emergencies, etc., etc. And my son, he's a pulmonary expert at Ohio State Medical School.
Okay, so the education that you got and the job that your wife had was allowed you to have your children, give your children a good education.
Oh, well, of course.
Yeah, we've got to be wrapping up now. Any additional comments? If you had it to do over again, would you have joined the military or would you have tried to stay out?
Oh, no, I had to join the military. Oh, no.
But would you have wanted to?
Huh?
If you had the choice, would you have?
You know, my country, right or wrong, my mother, drunk or sober, I'm never going to abandon the motherland.
Okay.
Good answer?
Good answer.